Welcome to Get Freight To It. I'm Chris Arredondo, co-founder here at Cargo Chief and host to Get Freight To It, where we give you faster, smarter, quality capacity to help take your freight to zero touch, lowering your cost per load. In our podcast, Get Freight To It, we cover unique topics going on in the world of freight with industry experts, from best practices, tips, tricks, new products, and whatever else impacts the industry. You name it, we'll talk about it. I caught up with Scott Douthitt, one of the early pioneers in the industry, and had the pleasure of working alongside him at C.H. Robinson back in 2013. Out of the gate, we talk about what Scott and his team did at Robinson in the early 90s to get freight on the board. Now, this was a time when your desks only had pencil, paper, and maps. Fast forward to today, can't really imagine walking in an office without computers. We get into the biggest transferable skill going from Robinson to Trailer Bridge and how modal expansion, technology, and efficiency aided growth. His biggest advice: leverage relationships with your existing customer base and identify where your successes come from. Second, your people. Listen in as we get freight to it. Scott Douthitt, tell me who you are, background, where you spent time, the whole thing.
Sure. So started in the industry right out of college back in 1991 with C.H. Robinson. So I actually came into the C.H. Robinson environment, selling produce and moving produce, and realized I needed to get the hell out of that as quick as possible. And so I transitioned into transportation. So I spent 25 years at C.H., eventually managed their Houston office for the last 17 years that I was there. Took my required couple of years off and had the itch to get back into it again because it was in my blood. And so I came on board with Trailer Bridge and opened an office for them and moved into more of a oversight. I'm their VP of logistics currently, and focus a lot on the ops side of the business for their brokerage arm.
I remember walking into the Sugarland office, and you opened that one, right? That one down in Sugarland?
Actually, the office in Houston opened in '78,
Really?
and
Wow.
and so I actually when I came on board, there was only two or three people I think that were on the truckload side, the non-produce side, but I was there for obviously for quite a while.
Yeah, I remember walking in, and Robinson was my first job out of college. My goal was to get to Houston, and however I could do that. I almost ended up like selling cell phones in like a Best Buy and a Walmart and stuff. They were like, yeah, we sell all the major brands like Samsung, and we go into stores like Best Buy and all this stuff. So luckily, I was extended an offer by Robinson. So that could have been a very different career path. But I remember walking in and seeing like I had no idea what logistics was, any of that stuff. And I remember walking into that office, and there was like I want to say it was a poster or like a big picture of a container with like produce or something. I was like, what is it? What do you guys do? I didn't even know like stuff was shipped in those things like produce. And we didn't get into the produce side. It was mostly like truckload when I was there, but we exchanged a couple things. We, know a lot of the same people, which was pretty cool. And then I met you again at Technovations, was it? I think it was.
TIA, you bet,
Yeah.
back in Jacksonville.
Yeah. And it's crazy how big this industry is, but you're always going to see somebody again. There's not like a person that you won't ever see. It's so big yet so small. I guess for you, because I think not a lot of people were blessed to work at CH. Like, it was a really cool experience to see just freight moving and just know that you're sort of the middleman or the person behind the curtain, sort of like the Wizard of Oz, and like moving freight here and there. And I never knew what that was. And, in college they talked about it, but it was just like a little square in the supply chain. It wasn't like, I didn't know how big it was. And I think Robinson did a lot of good things, and like how they just grew. Like, the growth was crazy. And even when I was there, it was awesome to see. What would you say like were some big challenges that you guys had? Just, you said 91. Like, what were the challenges back then? Were they the same as they are today?
Well, no. The whole brokerage environment today is accepted far differently than it was back in the day. When I joined, you still were an outcast being a broker. you had to sell beyond that because you had no
Yeah.
control over your trucks, and there were so many different things that we had to grow into. And I absolutely, and I will tell you, the entire brokerage industry should probably be thankful that those of us that were early pioneers of brokerage, CH was one of the first ones after deregulation to start moving into that. They used to own assets
Yeah.
and moved away from it to go to that. Non-asset or light asset model. But that was the biggest challenge. Today, it's not so much of a challenge to sell through being a broker. It's just making sure that you're clear with your intentions, because the industry still treats asset and broker differently. So it's not, again, as much of a stumbling block as it is an opportunity. Again, we learned quickly to advertise that, if we are tied to assets, and there's some assets that are broken down, then we're stuck. But being a broker, we can pivot and find additional capacity to help our customers. So it is
Yeah.
it is a little bit different, obviously today than the early days, but it was very difficult back in the early '90s, no question.
Yeah. What were carriers? I mean, were they, I guess, how did it progress? Like, if we talk about booking freight, back then, loads on a bulletin board and stuff like that at a truck stop, but like, were carrier negotiations the same, or was it, because today if you book a load, it's more carriers know what prices are using load boards. They can see like different markets, and like sort of a carrier that goes all around the country, they can use tools to see like what prices, what that lane's going for. Was that, I couldn't imagine that being the same thing back then, was it? I mean, how did you guys negotiate like rates with carriers?
It was still very early. Early brokerage was very simple. It was, here's the rate, and you knew that they tacked 12% on top of it, or something similar to that.
Yeah.
The art of negotiation, or the time of negotiation, was very much early in my career. And obviously, we didn't have the technology. We were back on a mainframe system with the CRT sitting in front of us, that and two telephones and a
Yeah.
pad of paper, and that was how you did it. It was strictly, we were building a foundation, because we were having to enter carriers and obviously enter customers into the system, and that was building out our capabilities. But it was all extremely manual. But that negotiation um, was probably not a lot more unique than what it is today. But the pioneering of negotiation and the brokerage side of it, it did come over from a flat percentage that was put on top of the freight cost in the very early days of
Yeah.
brokerage.
So you would, like RFPs, right? RFPs and bids. There's several that come through these days. Like, how was that? Like, was that the same? Like, how would you
Mm,
quote
It,
1,000 lane bid? Was that even,
it,
did that
it
even
didn't
exist?
exist. Well, nobody had. I mean, when you think about it, we didn't have PCs in my office when I started.
Yeah.
So you weren't having somebody spitting out a spreadsheet. What was
Yeah.
very common is to have a 48 state to state matrix. That was early pricing. It was all on a piece of paper, sometimes handwritten, and sometimes even handwritten and faxed back and forth.
Wow. Yeah.
Remember those things, because that was our lifeblood, was a fax machine, to have something in writing. But no, there we did not. It was a state rate, more than likely. When you
Yeah.
get into the bisection of states that we deal with today, very different than what it was back in the early days of brokerage.
That's wild. I have a friend, Vin over at Fenice. He posted a picture, I think it was of his dad booking freight, and it was exactly what you said. There was no computer. Like, I can't imagine walking into an office without a computer. Like, that's, you have to have it. Now
Yeah,
it's so different.
well, you think about it, most brokers, the inception of brokers is people that were in a stall at a truck stop, and they were looking at the trucks that were there, and they were trying to put truck with load, and that was
Yeah.
really how some of that stuff got off the ground. And even to that point, when things were tight, produce is running out of the Texas Valley, and it's like a huge suction noise going down to the valley. We would go to truck stops and write down carrier names, call them back in, and we
Yeah.
would see if we could find. And you had no idea if the truck was loaded or not.
Yeah.
You were doing whatever it took. We put pencils in the calling booths. There used to be the load board used to be on the wall of a
Yeah.
truck stop,
Yeah.
and so that's obviously now technology is far different.
Yeah. So I guess like, because a lot of new brokers, like they're trying to hustle, and like if they open a new shop, or just even maybe they're on the trail of 500 loads a month, like a lot of people always ask how to grow, and our approach often is technology, right? And like RFPs, and just being more creative with carrier relationships, bidding strategically, not just like taking a load. How did, like, what was that like? Like, how did you guys grow the office, like in sales, from the sales side? Was it just because you had assets in the beginning and people knew your name? Or I wouldn't even imagine that, but
Yeah, no, it really wasn't so much. It was really wasn't so much naming. It was pounding the streets. I mean,
yeah,
you really. We had a lot of offices blanketing the country,
yeah,
giving us the ability to have boots on the ground to get out and go meet people. And the foundation for
yeah,
any strong business is relationship. And in the early days, we were good at developing those relationships, which grows into being able to support a customer through good times and bad times. And that's that really still is the same today. But technology, it blows my mind to see some of the things. And just when I think I've seen everything, somebody
yeah,
else comes up with something that whether it's AI generated or just there's so many eye-opening things that assist us with what we do every day.
yeah,
It's pretty crazy for sure.
yeah. I mean, even when I was at Robinson, we had like the tech that we had there. I mean, the tech spend and budget was a lot more than what a lot of brokers will ever have. And it was just really cool to see like a TMS that did what it could. And like now these days, it's a lot of the bolt-on things to a TMS to build it similar to what Navisphere can do. And it was just really crazy. Like the tech that was in there, like even just like purple trucks, like how we would call things in a different term where other TMSs don't, like they just didn't have as, I guess, as many users or use cases to figure out what a purple truck even is useful for. Um, so I
Exactly.
guess, from your transition, obviously at Robinson for a good bit of time, what was that? What would you say like the biggest transferable skill was going to Trailer Bridge?
Yeah, I think I'll refer back to number one, relationship, from a customer and carrier perspective. That importance. One thing that translates really really well is that you have to treat your customers and your carriers alike, or you don't have one or the other. But probably were what I learned, and I'll have to say I learned more watching people do it wrong than I probably did watching people do it right. And that started with my first manager in this industry, and I carried that on, and that segment of it was really about the people and about the team that you build. You not only want people to be inspired, but you want to be the one that's inspiring them. And you want to get people that are career minded. And I was very fortunate, not only with at CH Robinson, but also here at Trailer Bridge. You're only as successful as the people you surround yourself with, and you really you hear a lot of people say that to the point of being cliche, but
Yeah,
it's how you treat them, how you respect them, how you reward them, and then the rest of the picture and the pieces all kind of fall into place.
yeah. So going to going to Trailer Bridge, and I think like where you've got CH2, goals and KPIs obviously were something that you had an eye for, I think, going to Trailer Bridge. And you mentioned to me earlier it was like 150 loads a person or something was the first goal, and that's a lot. Like we at Robinson, we were, I think, the guy I sat next to, Ricardo, was booking, I don't know, like 900 loads a month. And like, because he had tech like Navisphere and the relationships, and people would wait on hold just to talk to him. And like, I think without, at least a toolbox of tech today, you can't really get past 150 loads a person. So I guess, what goals did you guys have, there at Trailer Bridge whenever you started?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me that was on my mind is, they were obviously a smaller organization than what I had been part of. The low hanging fruit was modal expansion. Because we hadn't moved into all the different crevices of the brokerage world, so that was probably the first pursuit, but we had to get efficient, and from a technology perspective, our previous TMS was not efficient, and from a tech perspective, what is uh, very helpful today is that there are products on the market, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the TMS that we've transitioned to, but there's several platforms out there that allow small and medium sized brokerages to do a lot of the same things as the big houses, and
Yeah.
and that's the part that we needed to focus on. Is if we have the intent of doing over 100 or even 150 average transactions per person, you can't do it with old technology. It has to
Yeah.
be done with new technology and leveraging integrations.
Yeah. So you mentioned modal expansion. It kind of takes us to this naval contract that you guys brought on. I think it was announced, what, 2-3 weeks ago, something like that, possibly.
Yeah,
And it was something like north of $1 billion naval
yeah.
contract. Can you
So
add any color on that?
sure. So one of the areas of expansion that we had as we continue to diversify was to bring somebody in who has a lot of experience with government cargo. And so we were fortunate enough to get Chris Goss to join Trailer Bridge. Brought a wealth of experience in moving government DoD related projects. The structure around this, and I can't claim to know a whole lot of details because it is really complicated.
Yeah.
But that's the wheelhouse that he came from, and what he brought was that knowledge of how to get in on that bidding process, and from a high level, what ends up happening with some of these larger opportunities is they'll have a long term opportunity. Let's say it's a 5 year or a 10 year, and you have to be able to make it past stage one to be awarded that opportunity at that freight. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get all of that. What it
Yeah.
means is the other people who didn't get invited to the table, they cannot touch that freight. We
Yeah.
are very thankful because for several years we have the opportunity at very very large projects for government cargo. So it's very exciting. It's helped aid our expansion to Germany. We opened up an office in
Wow.
Germany recently. We'll continue to eye those opportunities because there's a lot. Again, fill in those voids. Any area that we haven't currently leveraged, we're out looking for ways to leverage them.
Yeah. I think I shared with you that at one company I was like, ran the international department, and when I saw like a naval contract, I was like, I've never booked a government freight. I saw a few loads in my time, but I don't even know what goes into like trying to win that business, or even like had bidding on it or anything. But there was a load somebody had. It was a container of like cherry wood pianos or something coming from Huzi Whatzi, China. I don't even know. And coming down over here. And I gave them a quote, like, went to some other broker and got a quote and gave it back to them. And lo and behold, whenever it got to like the States or something, there was like I don't know, some rights on the wood and things that we had to pay extra for, taxes and duties. And I had no idea. And so we ended up, I think, probably losing money, or if nothing else. And so this sort of stuff, the naval contract or any government freight, anything like that. It's pretty awesome to see, like, somebody know how to do that stuff, and that's their focus. And I think that's like one of the things that I try to mention to brokers is like, find your niche and stay in it at least until you can grow, and then you can like go and venture out if you can get the right personnel, the right people, the right technology, and all that stuff. But that's pretty cool. I guess I want to shift a little bit, because we do a lot of digital freight matching, and a big mission of ours is to really just provide quality options to brokers and improve the experience for a carrier. Because it's, time and time again, I talk to carriers and they're like, hey, yeah, I like what you guys are doing, because that means my broker isn't going to post my loads up on a load board. And I'd rather get the first crack at freight. If I'm a loyal carrier to that broker, why not send it to me first? Because that, even at Robinson, man, when I would post loads, or it would go out there, however that worked, and carriers would call and they'd be like, hey man, like, why didn't you give me a call about this load? I told you to give me a call every time you get it. And I was like, dude, I didn't even think about it, or I didn't get to it, or whatever, sort of, due to the day. I guess, like, when we talk about the shifting landscape of technology, and AI seems to be everywhere, is this what, I guess, a question like, what era would you say that we're in? Because you've seen it from the very, very like manual process to where that has become traditional process. And now it's like load boards and this AI stuff and freight matching. Like, what era would you say we're in? Is there like an evolution of load boards that needs to happen in order to evolve? Or I don't know, just kind of an open-ended question there.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, and no offense to the companies that have built out the load board
Yeah.
uh, world, but it is, I view it as a necessary evil, and the evil did not really rear its head until some of the fraud that we've seen that's been rampant over the course of the last year and a half or so. um, what I try to stress to our people, and we're working really hard currently on this. We were experimenting with some different ways of approaching freight, different than just posting and waiting. Yeah, I personally, I think that's laziness. I think you need to develop a relationship with the carrier. You're always going to have a need for posting freight, but the majority of our freight, if I feel like we're successful, it's going to be because a high percentage of our freight is, number one, repeat carriers, number two, managed relationships. Back in the earlier days of CH, we knew that we were inundating carriers by calling them too much. And because, there, I mean, hell, they had 130 offices or more at any given moment, back, at a certain point in time, and you can only imagine these carriers were worn out. And so really managing our carriers, treating them like customers, like I mentioned earlier, and progressing beyond post load, that's where we need to be.
Yeah.
And again, I think we should leverage that. And I think from a load board perspective, a lot of work needs to be done on ferreting out some of the negative things that can come through. It is an entry point for fraud, so we have to be very careful. We've had to create different processes, as virtually every broker has, to protect ourselves through vetting exercises. But I think if you want to characterize it as some sort of evolution, I think it's more of a conglomerate. And one thing that we've tried recently, with a very small number of our carrier managers, is to take away load boards, take away inbound calls. And they're doing everything from looking at route history. They're building their own we used to call it zone books back in the day, but they're literally doing some manual work. And we just recognized one of our guys in the month of January, 99% of his books were repeat carriers. It was
Yeah.
fully managed. He moved a lot of volume, and we're trying to show that you can do it differently than just posting a load and waiting for the phone to ring or an email to come in.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk. You made a good point there. First, I think as the carriers were worn out, and you wouldn't call a customer 3 times a morning,
Not at all.
like even now, like even when I was there at Robinson, I really liked the it was like a carrier portfolio or something where you had like cold leads. Like we looked at carriers like leads in a way, and to like progress them through the pipeline to get them eventually to like a hot carrier or some like final stage of a regular carrier relationship. And I think like when you go back to what you guys are doing at Trailer Bridge, that's like when we talk to customers too, it's like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit or a lot of elbow grease in the beginning. But if the outcome that we want is to pre-book, 60% of our loads with repeat carriers, that if we want that outcome, we have to work to get there. It's not just you can't keep posting. You can't keep like telling your carrier, even like for manually assigning loads and stuff like that. It may be like 5 clicks, 2 minutes. That's 2 minutes, 5-10 clicks that you don't have to do 30 times a month. And it's like when we talk about that part of we look at lanes with our customers sort of like a pipeline. There's like bottom of the funnel lanes, which is your repeat lanes, your repeat carriers. Those are the ones that we should automate first, and then we go up line to where we got like middle of the funnel and then top of the funnel, where like your guy has gotten everything to bottom of the funnel, and that's like where you need to be, right? Because it's that zero touch booking, and like your carriers are going to be a lot happier if they can just know that your loads aren't going to be posted out there, because that's their livelihood. And
Sure.
I don't know, it's interesting just to see like y'all's approach to that, and like just really like sandboxing it and seeing the experiment, and then how do you scale it to get to every person to be able to do it like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the challenge. And I know we're on Mastery Logistics Systems, and it is very carrier centric, which has helped with that approach. And there's plenty of automations that early on we weren't using, and we're trying to get in the groove of it. But it does, and what we know to be the case, you have to leverage managing a carrier like a customer to make it work. And that not only builds a long-term relationship with that carrier, but it builds consistency for your customer. Not to mention the fact that a lot of customers don't want their freight posted on load boards,
right.
to the point where many of them will ask you, don't do that. And some of them will actually get subscriptions to see if you're posting your freight. So it gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, I've heard that it's a handful of times, and there's a better way to book freight is all I'll say to that. I guess for the other thing that you said is like it's like managing carriers or managing rules and exceptions versus managing transactions. And I think like as we look ahead into the next couple of years, that's definitely like our mission, to more of like freight management and not load board management or like transaction. And again, like load boards aren't bad. It's a great product. It does what it needs to do. It's just the marketplace, like you said, it's an entry point for fraud. And how do you at least cut down that? And you got to think of where does that stolen load, where did that carrier originate from? Or like where did that happen? Like why did it even originate there? And so it's just different things to think of that. And I think the way that data is brought up now, it's a little bit more easy to interpret, but it's also data is just data unless you can interpret it, and unless your tech partners are helping you do that, it's just going to be another cog in the wheel or another data point, and for nothing, just to talk about a set of spreadsheets in a room for an hour and then go on back to posting freight. So I guess to pass it to you, what gets you, I'd say, the most excited in the next, couple years?
For me, it is our continual expansion into areas that we have not uh, penetrated. We're doing all modes of transportation. We have a lot of growth opportunity and some of the newer modes that we've taken on, like government. But there's a lot of areas that are untapped. I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about is to get the hell out of this freight recession. And there are positive signs that have happened over the past couple of months
Yeah,
that builds a lot of assurance that we are going to get back to at least a neutral market.
yeah,
Um, I'm not ready to say, like some have, that the freight recession is over with, but we've been very fortunate. We have managed to continue to grow our volumes during all of this, so that gets me excited, because even though we may not have had the right margin environment to work with, we've been able to retain business. We've made internal changes to support faster growth, and that really really gets me excited. And we got a great group of
yeah.
people. Our core brokerage offices are really poised right now, and we're excited to see things continue on the same path we've seen over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, I think it was beginning of Q4, and I was like, what are you seeing and in the market? And they're like, well, we're what did he say? He said we're forecasting flat, so we have to like budget flat or something like that. Whereas like because of where it is, and I think there's a lot of risk of adding on new things to help you grow if you don't know like where like what's the market telling us right now. Like are we still flat? Like did we even grow? And I don't think the thing is to just, I've called it before, the throw body model, just to throw bodies at the problem. Like you got to figure out ways to be more efficient and more loads per rep, really, and try to drive that. And it's kind of what I've seen and what people have said, at least for budgeting. So it's exciting to hear you at least say that. Yeah, it's there's some trends here, so that's awesome. I guess for companies out there, sort of as we wrap up, like that are trying to navigate change, or just some things that you've done, what advice would you give to anybody that's trying to grow right now and through this market?
Yeah, I think uh, the two sides that you have to look at from an external perspective. If you cannot leverage your relationships, not only with your existing customer base, but to kind of help that and how you got there into that relationship, you got to work with your people to replicate that. And a lot of times you have to remind people of where your success came from and how you actually came into that success.
Yeah,
So working on that and making sure everybody has a clear definition of what that looks like is important. But I can never underestimate people. That is our capital. That's where we have invested time, energy. I know when I came on board to Trailer Bridge, it was only 6 years ago, but we didn't have robust training and personnel development paths, and we've done a fantastic job of that. And we had a conversation internally just a couple of days ago about career-minded people versus people that are just looking for a job.
hmm,
You make those people career minded. You make those people want to be in this environment by the way that you treat them, by the way you develop them, and by the way that you encourage them. And I one thing that I will tell you should never ever go away, especially in the brokerage world, is people all together on a big, loud, packed floor. It's a lot different today because people don't leverage telephones the same way. They don't make the same noise that we used to make. We need to make a lot more damn noise. because I will tell you that's what got the energy moving. That's what made people feel like they belong. That's what
Yeah.
made them go run through brick walls. And having your people all share that type of feeling towards their employer is a pretty damn special thing. And I think it's still there. You got to get the right people, but you know what? If you treat them right, they may turn into exactly what you're looking for.
Fucking right, man. That was like when I was on the floor at Robinson with our homies there it was like 6 of us, I think.
Yep.
It was because Omar was hiring for culture and for the people. And like, that was like, I felt like that was my family. It was so fucking fun just to like talk on I mean, dude, it was like 300-400 calls a day probably, but it was fun. It wasn't like, and it was a lot of noise right there just coming from our little pod. And it was just really a really cool atmosphere. And that you're right. Need to make more noise. Scott,
Totally.
It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And we'll be in touch.